Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Kungl, just chairing this meeting for Councillor Gary Harvey, who is a member of committee and will be joining us perhaps remotely in a moment, but we will get the meeting going. So I will call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting to order at 5:25 p.m. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. For this evening, we have no public meetings. We have no open delegations. We do have a presentation. Pursuant to Procedural Bylaw 2019-100 as amended, the order of business be altered such that the presentation concerning the 2026 business and budget be considered in conjunction with item 7.2 concerning the 2026 business plan and budget, city operations and infrastructure, investment funding portions. So I'll ask for support by members of committee. So around the table this evening would be for those that don't watch finance regularly. We do have majority of council here, but your members of voting committee would be Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, myself, and Councillor Gary Harvey. So we will do that just so we are able, if we may, receive the presentation and then also address the item, which is under 7.2, so we can ask questions of both the presentation and the item on the agenda. Okay, I'm seeing consent for that. Thank you. So I'd now like to call for the presentation concerning the 2026 business plan and budget. Mayor Nuttall, would you like to speak to that before we call staff forward? Yeah, I'm going to go over the podium. Great. Okay. Thank you.
And our public service has done a ton of work on this. What we as members of council, and certainly myself in position as mayor, get to do is to set the direction, and what our public service does is then row and get us there. And it's no different with this budget. And if we can go to the next slide, this is a strong mayor budget underneath the Strong Mayors Act that was, brought forward by the provincial government. But the way that we've tried to make it work here is sticking to that idea of setting the direction and staff, public service doing the work to make sure that we get there, to keep it away from being too political, but also allowing for that lens of where we want to be put in place in advance. And so in the spring, we were able to put forth the direction and the expectation of a 0% on the operating. We're going to continue with the 2% for capital. That's something that we set out at the beginning of the term. And thankfully, and thank you to all of you, we've been able to continue with it and complete that. We are focusing on being able to deliver those incredible services that our residents rely on. But we're doing it in a way that is building on the growth that we've seen here in the City of Barrie, rather than just going back to the taxpayer and increasing the city operations tax. Next slide, please. In terms of building Barrie's financial future, as I said, we've had a long-term look at this as a City Council, and I want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you've done as a council to stay disciplined. If you look at the number of items for discussion, this term versus previous terms, the spending associated, the on a whim decisions, I think we've been able to keep those at bay, and we've been very focused on how we can use the dollars that we're trusted with to represent or to move the city forward. And I think there's some serious pieces here on the stability and the condition of the city that need to be articulated. One is the retirement of $56 million in debt in the last 3 years. That is a very, very prudent approach. So thank you to Craig and the entire team for that. And also, if you look at the $75 million over the past 2 years coming out of our portfolio, and those are massive amounts. To put it in perspective, the last 4 years was 90, the last 2 years was 75. So there has been some incredibly strong work done by the investment board, by our staff supporting the investment board, and I think that that needs to be recognized. It's not, as it says on the screen, an accident. It takes discipline, day in and day out, and quite frankly, having been on the other end as a banker, it takes a lot of time to ensure that we're getting best rates, both on borrowing and on investments, as well as being able to make sure that we have products that are going to allow us to be cash when we need to be cash, and long-term we need to long-term. So we go to the next slide, please. So I want to take an opportunity, because we haven't sat since we learned this really, to say thank you to our entire complement of staff that have been part of this. If you're part of the finance team, can you just stand up for me? I know you're not expecting this, but if you're part of the finance team, please stand up. You either are or you aren't. What these folks, under the leadership, obviously, of Jeff and of Michael, have achieved is remarkable. And if you look at the last number of years, it's not just the fact that our investments have grown 75%, it's the fact that we've gone consistently getting recognized by S&P. So thank you to each and every one of you for the work you've done for the city. Thank you to both of you for the work that you've done for the city on the managing of it as well. And I think we're in very, very good hands is what we're being told. Now this comes to the point where there's two individuals that I'm going to take an opportunity to recognize. I don't do this. In fact, this is probably the first time that I've done this. Eh, Wendy? Yeah, okay. I don't do it often. And it takes a banker nerd to give out recognition for these types of things. But such is my life. And so I wanted to give out an award of excellence. And the first person that I'm going to bring down is probably daily in the conversations to make sure that both our borrowings and our investments are well handled. And sometimes that means, and I don't think I'm making this up, sometimes that means bugging banks in the morning to find out what the best rates that we can get. Okay, here's your posted best rates, but what can you actually do to move money around daily? And all of those individual moves add up to an immense amount of money at the end of the year. So Thierry, if you can come down, we have an award for excellence, for you. And anything you want to say?
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for, again, it takes leadership at the top, from council down to senior staff, for us to be able to do what we do. And I look around the room, and many of you guys have probably heard from us. If they're spending $1, let us know. If there's money coming in, let us know. So I want to thank everyone because it's a team effort. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tia. Now the next one, he's really going to hate this. He told me when I was elected mayor that this was a goal of his, was to make sure that we got to a AAA rating, and it was kind of a 10 to 15 year plan. And when you consider it's been 2.5, 3 now, I guess, years that he said that, I think it's not very often we take the time to stop and thank our senior staff. So when I give this to Michael, our Chief Administrative Officer, he's accepting it because it's got his name on it, but he's accepting it, and he'll say this before I ever would, so I'm going to jump in front of him. that it's literally built on all of the senior team, and it goes right down through the organization. You don't have the type of change in our position financially unless it's all hands on deck. But you are the leader of that ship. And for that, Michael, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the taxpayer. Things like credit ratings don't, win you headlines the way that you'd want to, but they have an immense amount of value. And I just said this in camera, so I'm going to say it out in public. We set a path as a council to say we wanted to have fuel in the tank so that we could do the things that this city deserves, that the people have been told they would get. And through all of that work that's happened throughout the corporation, we are finally there. So on behalf of council and on behalf of the city, Michael, I want to present you with this award of excellence. Did you know this was happening?
Absolutely not, Mayor Nuttall. I didn't. Thank you very much. I didn't know you were giving Thierry an award. I did know you were recognizing him. I certainly didn't know I was getting an award. And I will simply echo your thoughts, which are, I get the joy of standing up here and accepting recognition for all of the incredible work of the 1,000+ employees in this organization. The finance and the treasury team are simply remarkable. It's not a huge team. They're incredibly dedicated. They work day and night. And the work they have done, we're celebrating the credit rating. This has been a mantra, a mandate, a calling for them, working day and night. And it's not just them. Stephanie, I don't know, Stephanie Schlichter's not here. Stephanie joins us in those meetings and tells the narrative about the City of Barrie and how we're growing and how we're evolving, what the economy looks like today, what it looks like tomorrow. This is an all hands on deck effort. And I get to accept recognition for an incredibly talented team that is so dedicated to this city. It makes me incredibly proud. So thank you to Council for your leadership, and thank you, Mayor Nuttall and Council, for this recognition. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, and well stated, Mayor Nuttall, on the compliments. Again, sincere compliments and to the team and beyond. And CEO Prowse, really, as the mayor was stating, incredible and much to be proud of. And I know we get to celebrate staff and can put some spotlights on that, but I dare say it's finally nice to actually put a spotlight on you, although it's maybe a place of discomfort. But thank you. So on that, I am pleased to welcome up Mr. Gillespie to provide the presentation with respects to the 2026 business plan and budget.
Can you hear me? There we go. Okay, good evening, Chair Kungl, members of council and committee, and residents who are joining us tonight. Welcome, thank you for being here. Tonight's presentation, I'll take you through the fun part of the budget after the highlights that we just received. So we're going to start with how the budget was developed under the Strong Mayor framework. Then we're going to move through the tax and user rate budgets on the operating side. We'll look at the capital plan, and then we'll move into the financial condition. And finally, we'll have a look at the next steps as we prepare for Barrie's future. My goal here is to give you a clear picture of how this budget supports residents, the services that residents rely on every day, whilst also making sure that we're building for the future and making sure that there's a strong financially sustainable city. So kind of think of it like a household. We're balancing today's needs, but we're saving for the future, and we're making sure we're ready for any of life's little surprises. Only we have a few more zeros and a lot more infrastructure. So Mayor Nuttall just talked to this. This is the third year that we've developed the budget under the Strong Mayor legislation. And it was signed into June 25th or 24th, 2025. I've pasted here all the directions, but I would highlight the main items are the 0% tax increase for the city services portion of the budget, and also that there's going to be a reallocation of the stormwater levy in 2027, so something to look forward to next year. This is a slightly different slide. Typically, we focus on the tax-supported budget, and we will talk about the five-year capital plan. But this graphic shows a more realistic view of what it is that you're passing today for 2026, and really how big Barrie's budget actually is. So, as you can see, the proposed budget is almost 660 million. The operating, and actually one third of this, well, around one third relates to capital, about 208 million. So the operating budget will be spent providing services to residents and businesses and making contributions to reserves. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail now. As we did last year, we've included page identifiers. You've got your budget binders just today, so the page identifiers are there if you do want to look at these in a bit more detail. So we'll start with the tax-supported operating budget. This is the part of the budget that funds day-to-day services across the city. Now, as shown on the expenditure side, almost all of it, 97%, is made up from three areas. That's transfer to reserves, salary and benefits, and general operations. Now, the main takeaway on the revenue side is a strong stability and predictability of revenue sources. A large portion of our revenue is not relying on other sources of government, and that's something that credit rating agencies really do like to see. As per the Mayor direction, the increase on city services was to be 0%, and the table here shows how we got there. We use a building block approach. So maintaining services is always, that's the main driver. It's a net number, and it's offset by some investment revenue and higher fees. The operational subsidy, that used to be a flow through. What we would do is part of the Electra dividend went to the reinvestment reserve, and we would put it back into the base. We're now using the whole BHHI dividend, so that increase of 1.3 million is included there. On the debt management side, we retired some tax levy debt, so that's about $750,000 that we get back. On the reserve contribution side, there's a little bit extra that's needed for a WSIB reserve and the fleet replacement reserve. New investments and service recommendations are very small this year, only 73,000, and I'm going to talk to that in the next slide. And then offsetting all of that is the assessment growth. This is the number of new residents we expect to see next year coming in. That balances out and takes us back to zero. So new investment and staff resources are needed to ensure the city can deliver the services that are needed, particularly for a growing city like Barrie. I will say that the executive management team gets a much larger list of demands. They cut it down to the table that you see here, and that's what these are what we consider the highest priority. Rounding off this part of the operating budget is the infrastructure investment funding. So the strong mayor directive was for 2%. 1% of it, half goes to tax capital and half goes to stormwater. And that's around about $104 impact the average Barrie resident. Now, no one likes to see an increase, but this investment is essential. It's much like maintaining a home. You can skip fixing a roof or a driveway, but after a while, those costs will begin to add up. So the aim of the approach we have is to try and get ahead of those bigger, more expensive problems down the line. User rate budgets. Now, in the past, we would just have a slide that said this is the rate increase that we're going to have for water and wastewater and parking, but we wanted to give you a more detailed view of what it is that you're passing. So this is the water rate expenditures. The budget ensures that Barrie continues to provide safe, clean and reliable drinking water. This is something that most of us truly don't notice unless it's not there. The city's water operating budget complies with financial plans regulation under the Safe Drinking Water Act that ensures that the system is on a full cost recovery basis. A comprehensive financial plan to get us to that was performed in 2021. As shown here, the total gross costs are just under 40 million, with the largest components being the transfer to reserves, salaries and interdepartmental transfers. So I spoke to the gross amount, and as you can see, most of that was 39.8. Most of that is paid for by the water rate revenue. There are a small number of other revenue sources that we get for water, but really it's mostly paid for through the rate revenue. As you'll see here, There's anticipated to be a 9.4% increase. Now that's an increase in the revenue. The revenue is made up from rate times the population, so we're anticipating about a 4% increase in the rate. The growth will make up the rest, so that's around 5.4%. An important item to notice here actually is the contribution to the Water Capital Reserve. If you're following the budget binder, you'll see the table there, and it shows that the amortised expense based on historical cost, we now contribute more than that number. We are still falling a little short on the amortised expense based on replacement, and that's all about replacing the infrastructure that we anticipate will be coming. On the wastewater side, these funds help maintain and expand the underground infrastructure that supports growth, so the part of the system that's out of sight but hopefully never out of service. Ontario regulations require a financial plan for water, but they only recommend one for wastewater. When we did our plan in 2021, we decided to do the rate study for wastewater as well, so we had a financial plan put together for that. So this is also based on a full cost recovery operation. As shown here, the costs are just under 52 million. Again, the largest costs are coming from transfer to reserves, the salaries and interdepartmental transfers. So I spoke to the expenditures being around 51.7. Most of that's paid for by revenues. We don't have a lot of, rate revenues. We don't have a lot of other revenue sources for wastewater. As you'll see, the expected change in the revenue is 10.3. This lines up as we have a 5% increase in the rates. That leaves growth of around 5.3. So that kind of lines up with water, which as a finance person, that gives me some comfort. Again, the important item to notice here is the contribution to the Wastewater Capital Reserve. If you're following along in the binder, you'll see that we're noticeably above the amortised expense based on the historical numbers, but again, just in line with water, we are still behind what the replacement cost of the infrastructure would be. We'll talk more to these issues later in the presentation. Moving on to parking rate. So this is intended to be self-sustaining through user pay revenue, and we're now starting to trend in that direction, aided by the fact that we retired some debt on the Collier Parkade last year. We're halfway, so hopefully. So as I mentioned, there's no impact on the consumer for this. This is all self-funded. The 4.3% growth you'll see reflects increased downtown permit activity. So looking at the 2026 to 2030 capital plan, this is where a long-term vision takes shape. It outlines where we'll invest, what projects move forward, and how those investments are funded. It's not just about new builds, it's also about renewal, ensuring our existing infrastructure remains strong and serviceable for years to come. So again, if you want to follow along in your budget binder, this will be the capital binder this time, and that table is on page 5. Now, the budget for 2026 is 208 million, as we mentioned earlier, in the pie early on. The number is made up from a number of key projects, including the Sea Cadet relocation, the STEM Hub campus for Lakehead University, the Barrie North West Boutique Library, and the Performing Arts Centre and redevelopment in Park. There's a list of the other key projects that are going forward in 2026 in the executive summary on page 9. Now, if you look over to the right, you see what the 5-year plan is 685 million. That's made up from 391 of previously approved projects. You see that in the top line, as well as 294 million of requests that you're being asked to approve today. So what's in the 685? Well, it's mostly infrastructure, and that makes sense. Infrastructure makes up around 3/4 of the 11 billion in assets that the city currently has to look after. As you can see, we're obviously a growth municipality, so a large portion of the revenues that we're going to be using are going to come from development charges, although you can see that tax capital reserve is also going to have quite a large portion of the funding. This is a new slide, and we thought this would be useful because the information is in the capital binder, but it's kind of separate. We look at the 5 years, the first 5 years, the second 5 years. We put them all together here. And this shows the entire 10-year capital spend. A large portion of this is forecast, so it's still to be approved, basically. But it highlights how big the 10-year capital plan is. And as you can see, very large draws expected on the DC side, which makes sense. We're a growth city. And there is also just over 800 million in tax capital reserve. So we just looked at the expenditure side of the equation. Now it's time to look at how those projects are paid for and how this impacts Barrie's financial condition. A big part of the work we do in finance is working to provide a path to financial sustainability. And I did this last year, but I think it's important to know what you're aiming at. So what does financial sustainability mean for a municipality? It means that growth can be accommodated without unacceptable tax levy or debt increases, that infrastructure can be kept in a state of good repair and replaced at the right time, that service levels can be increased as the city urbanises, that service levels can be maintained in the face of changes to economic conditions, and more importantly, that the financial responsibility is fairly shared between current and future residents, something termed intergenerational equity. Basically, we want to leave the city in a good financial position for our children. We don't want any generation, past, present, or future, to be bearing a heavier load. So the idea here is to look over the debt and reserves, but I thought this was quite handy to look at the affordability measures. The city has a financial policy framework with some targets in it for affordability for the residents and for the city, that property taxes not exceed 4% of the average household income. There was a long-range financial plan done in 2009, and this recommendation from BMA came out of that. So we've had that in our financial policies for a while. We later brought in a 2.5% maximum for water and wastewater. As you can see, we're within both. And then on the city side, there is a legislative amount of 25% that your financing costs shouldn't go above. We brought in a stricter policy of 20%, and as you can see, we're well within that. And that's a big reason why we got to AAA this year, is because of this low amount of debt that we have. So we'll look at the reserves now, and we'll start with the development charge reserve. As I said, we're a growing city. We're anticipated to grow to 298,000 by 2051. So growth is a big part of our budget. We've implemented a DC deferral policy to align with recent provincial changes and to allow developers to pay later in the process. What this means is a developer would typically pay for DCs at the building permit stage, but now they can pay later on. So we're looking at a deferral of DC payment of around 2 years. So the aim is to stimulate growth, but what it does mean is we'll have to keep an eye on our reserves. Now, as you'll note, this reserve is currently forecast to be underfunded compared to where we typically see it. The main reason for this is timing, though. When departments prepared their capital submissions for this budget cycle, they did so before the legislative changes I just talked about came in, and that obviously impacted our expected revenues. Had we seen this before, we would have changed the capital plan, but by the time these came into effect, the capital plan was already well underway. And there wasn't enough time to fully adjust the plan to reflect the reduced funding levels. In short, the projects were planned under one set of assumptions, and then those changed. So our team is now reviewing the impacts, and we'll be bringing forward adjustments in future budget cycles to align project priorities with the revenue forecast that we have. The important thing to note is that we identified this issue early, and we did take steps to correct it moving forward. I'm just starting off with the two bad ones at the beginning. So the water reserves have a slightly different problem now. As I said earlier, they had a financial plan that was performed in 2021, went out to 2030. And by 2030, they'd anticipated having a small surplus in the reserve of around 6 million. As you can see here, we're under that. Now, there are significant costs in the plan, in the financial plan that was put forward. And at that time, they hadn't anticipated COVID would hit. And during COVID, there was significant inflation. The inflation assumptions that they would have used were far below what we saw in 21, 22, 23. where we were seeing 12, 15, and 7, 8% increases. So that's a 30% increase just there. That would be much higher than what we'd already anticipated. So the numbers make sense from a forecast point of view of what you see here. So that's why you're seeing a deficit there, or in our forecast anyway. On the wastewater side, although there is a positive balance, it would obviously face the same problem as water did, but there were a number of large projects that are delayed, so it's a good news story insofar as it's a positive reserve, but there are still projects that we're planning that still have to go forward with. The forecasted tax levy reserve. Now, this is all the tax levy reserves. It includes the tax capital reserve. As you can see, if the capital plan was spent as expected, we'd see a deficit in the outer years. In reality, staff would either delay projects or we'd issue debt to ensure the reserve doesn't hit those kind of levels. So again, this is just showing you if things were to go with no changes made. So look at that out of the way. Now we're into the happy news. This is debt. And again, a big reason why we got AAA, the credit rating agencies talked a lot about the fact that the debt is good. As you can see, our debt is 245 million. Almost 200 million of that is DC, which means residents aren't paying for it, it's developers. On the debt servicing side, you've got roughly 25 million of the 37 million that we're paying annually. Again, that's paid for by developers, or the collections that we get from developers, sorry. I mentioned this earlier on, the 8.3%, so this just shows that, it shows the level that we have. If there was a need to issue debt, we can really issue, I'm not saying that we will, but we do have the capacity to issue a lot more debt if need be and still be within our own internal limit, never mind the provincial limit. Now, our debt over the last sort of 12 years or so has been between sort of 280, 300 million. It peaked in 2021 where we had 331 million of debt, and it's been slowly coming down over the last 5 years. So you can see, and the Mayor did talk to this, that a lot of the debt over the last 2 years, but you could even go back further to 2021 and see that we do have a significant amount of debt that's come off the books. We're anticipating this to continue. This trend seems to be sort of leveling out around 230 million. I would point out, as you can see in 2030, there's a less portion of that is going to be DC, and it's going to be a slightly, again, if things go as we're forecasting, there'll be more debt on tax and in water. So that wraps up almost. I just wanted to say that, as I said, with the reserves, we did see that steps had to be taken to make sure that we are financially sustainable moving forward. So there were 4 areas that we've focused on. The reserves, we're looking at a new reserve strategy. So the plan there is to close and merge unused reserves. We do have a number of those. We want to formalise a reserve policy, but most importantly, what we want to do is provide reserve targets, because there has to be a context to the reserve so that you understand where they should be. Without the context, it's just numbers. You have to know how much we really need for whatever projects we're planning or for growth. So that's something that we're planning to do. The water wastewater study isn't needed for a number of years yet, but I did talk to the department and they're looking at bringing that forward. So next year there's a plan to do a water and wastewater rate study. So that would tackle that water reserve that we saw earlier on. The capital plan reprioritisation is a big one. As I pointed out in the slide earlier, 3.5 billion is quite a high forecasted capital plan to have. Now, we obviously have a DC background study that says how much we're planning on spending. So that is considered along with the rehabilitation assets that maybe are absolutely required. So there'd be a reprioritisation and we'd focus on what's important, and we bring that forward to Council to discuss. And we also actually have a large carry forward, which is another thing that could probably help bring that down. The debt analysis, that would simply be part of the capital prioritisation. When we finalise a new capital plan, it has to be funded from reserves and debt. If we have a target for our reserves, we know the debt level that we have to bring on. And so all that can then take place. And that's us at our next steps and the remaining council meetings that we have. So I will pause here.
Thank you, Mr. Gillespie. Mayor Nuttall, would you like to, before we open for questions, review or highlight any particular aspects?
It's just that one.
So just to, thank you, Craig, just to reiterate and perhaps even highlight some things that haven't been totally covered in the capital plan. I think it's important to recognize a few things. One, as you can see, the measurables that are in place to determine the financial strength and financial condition of the city. We're in great shape. That's not just internal. We're getting that from S&P. And, you know, part of the conversation we consistently have, and quite frankly, our public service consistently has with all of us, is that we need to always be looking to that long range and making sure that we're moving the city forward, not just in the year that we're talking about, but to be set on a path going forward. Lower debt, good news. Revenues, I think we're seeing some concern with relation to DCs, and that was just shown to you. But overall, the city is in the best financial shape as long as I've been around here. So that is all good news. But inside, there's a story that's also being told, which is an investment story, and some of that is into things like roads and sewers and pipes that we've been talking about already. When you think about the Huronia Mackay, you've got the investments along Yonge and Mapleview as well. We received massive provincial funding for. We've got neighborhood renewal projects, drainage and sewer. We've got fleet replacement, parks being built, and the province is still working through the Dunlop and Bayfield Street interchanges. So there's a lot of infrastructure being built and invested in here in the City of Barrie. And next slide, please. There's also those community building projects that we've talked about now for years, and they've come before this council many, many times. But 2026 is like the turning year. It's where we've been disciplined as a team, as our public servants have, and we've gotten to the position where we can see these things actually coming into fruition. Lakehead University, a STEM hub in downtown Barrie, that's in our old transit terminal, as you know. Georgian College moving across the street from City Hall. We made a $7.5 million contribution to them. The new recreation center and library over at Mackay Road and Huronia. We've got the Northwest Satellite Library as well, going over at Letitia Heights. We have the Performing Arts Center, which we'll start work on, I'm hoping in the spring or fall, to get a set up down on the waterfront to finally have that Performing Arts Center and convention space. The new YMCA in South Barrie, while we're not funding it, we did help fund it through the waiver of DCs and also through the Community Improvement Plan. The Regional Innovation Center, we are the very, very minor partner in that, but still a partner in it, and that's going to come into fruition. I believe it's actually set up now with a transitional board and the new Sea Cadets facility moving across the bay. And these are all inside of this 2026 budget. So all of that hard work that we've been working towards this point is finally going to pay off, and we're going to see some major investment inside of the city going forward. It doesn't matter where in the city you are. You can be in North Barrie, you can be in South Barrie, you can be downtown, you can be on the east or west side of the highway. There are major infrastructure items happening and major investments inside of making the city an even better place to live. So I think we should end there. I don't really want to answer any questions, and you probably don't want to hear me speak anymore. So we're going to direct questions over to Craig and the team and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So I'll look first to members of Finance and Responsible Governance Committee for questions. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Kungl. To Mr. Gillespie. You talked in regards to setting a target on our reserves and stuff, and I couldn't agree more with you. Having a target and knowing it, if you don't have that in a plan forward, they're just numbers. Would you be able to provide, and I know, sorry to put you on the spot, of where our reserves were? I know we depleted them during COVID to kind of, we drew on quite a bit of them during COVID to maintain a very low property tax, you know, as people were struggling to pay bills and stuff like that. But I'd love to see where we were at that stage to where we're going and the growth of our reserves. Just to see what they were pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, and what they are today, if that's possible, to see where they're at. And then there was another slide. Actually, you know what? That's a little more detailed question. I'll email it to you and stuff, but it was more about some of the deficiencies of so I'll email you that. But if you could get that information for me, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Members of non-committee, any questions for Mr. Gillespie? Not seeing any. I have one couple of comments, one question, if I may. Thank you. Isn't it a good sign? I know for those that have joined us a bit later, celebrating some awards around our rating and financial strategy, which has put us in a good position, but to have a presentation and be, shared that our debt is good, I think sometimes can be mind-boggling, but does actually play a huge picture when we look at the framework for which we identify our tolerance for debt and debt load and risk. And so I want to thank you for that and your approach to sharing this. And to the mayor, it is the mayor's budget for framing it around building for the future and really being mindful of looking at how to share costs fairly between current and future residents. So I think it is quite a great approach. It's our first blush this evening at looking at the mayor's budget. So for the public, while we're seeing a high-level presentation this evening, pending outcome, it will come to General Committee on the agenda on November the 5th. And I guess my only question at this point in time, if it's available in advance of digging further, is on the capital reserve and commitment. I believe it was over $3 billion that we've identified, if that's correct, over time. And when we talk about, I believe, the flexibility of, always bringing forward things to say, how do we move things or accountabilities in the capital plan, then at what point do we move so far down a movement that we're into a saturation over the next couple of years of things that are really non-negotiables? And so where do we, is there a year out or so where we become less flexible about what we can move out in our capital plan because we're dealing with those items or commitments that really have relationship to risk or development that we are not able to kind of say we can actually defer. And as a result, we might see more of a conversation about leaning into that 20% or higher debt load conversations. Is that in the forecast around where our capital plan becomes less flexible for us to have discretion on pushing items in out years? Through you, Mr. Gillespie, or CEO Prowse?
Through you, Chair Kungle. Annually, staff recalibrate and reprioritize the capital plan. So we bring back to council each and every year the capital plan, often with some minor changes in it, which are highlighted for council. And periodically, we'll come back to council specifically with an issue or a project which will need reprioritization or consideration by council. So I would say that there isn't a year specifically where that occurs. I would say it occurs every year. And we present that and put that in front of council each and every year. And as you look through your capital plan and your binders and take it home for some good night reading, I think that the members of council will see that, staff continue to focus on what we believe to be the priority pieces of infrastructure in the city. And we layer that in with the vision of council. And each and every year that capital plan is reprioritized and recalibrated for your blessing each and every budget period.
Thank you, CEO Prouse. And maybe my final question on more of the dividend return, which I believe was about 1.3 million that we've benefited from around the Bay Area Hydro Holdings.
6.2 million.
Sorry, 6.2 million.
Yeah.
Was the dividend a different amount that we're actually
That
seeing
ta-
into our?
Sorry, that table showed the difference between what we had in the base last year, which was 4.9 million, and the new amount that we were putting in is 6.2. So the difference, the delta, was 1.3 million.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mayor Nuttall, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, if I can. The change was essentially we sold some land. So we were able to move money from that into the Performing Arts Center account. And then we also had a project that we had been funding towards the parking lot that's going to be, so we found money that we didn't have, which allowed us to then reallocate the dividend to support the operations this year, and that then allows us to hold it at zero. So we didn't remove from the PAC fund. We actually increased the amount for the Performing Arts Center fund, but we did take what was there, which was the remainder. I think it was this year was 1.3, and other years it was different, to put it right into city operations.
Thank you for that clarification. That's all the questions I have. So I think that closes the agenda item on that. Again, thank you for the presentation and the mayor's budget. Oh, sorry, we do have an amendment, I believe. Is that through
Yes,
you, Mayor
yes.
Nuttall?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to put on the floor and then I'll speak to it. So the staff applied to the province of Ontario for funding in the amount of $5 million for the purpose of installing traffic safety calming measures in the City of Barrie, and the capital project traffic calming measures be increased by an additional $500,000, $50K per ward, to be funded in the interim from the ASC reserve fund, reserve pending receipt of any funding from the provincial government. And so I'll put that amendment on the floor. I think the reason, I don't usually do amendments, this might be my first in 4 years. The reason that I felt that it was important that it come from me is I'm the only one around the table who does not place traffic calming measures in the City of Barrie. Each member of council is responsible for their own ward to direct where these dollars go, how they're spent. And I, for one, believe that they're spent very well. We had set up the ASC cameras to fund traffic calming measures, and not to go into some sort of general ledger here at the city. And we have some of those dollars there right now. We've received a commitment from the Premier that they're going to be funding, and there was actually an announcement for traffic calming measures. I don't want to wait, and I think that it's appropriate to give each member of council an additional $50,000 worth of traffic calming measures for 2026, with an overall $5 million request to the province, meaning there would be roughly $500,000 per ward in traffic calming measures. And as you know, we want to focus in areas that are school-related or community safety zone related, but we need to make sure that traffic in these local areas are safe. So while I don't oversee a dollar of this, I see massive value in it, and that's why I've brought this forward. And I'm sorry it was an oversight on my behalf that I didn't get it into the budget sooner.
Thank you for that. I'll look to members of committee for any comments on the amendment. Okay, any members of non-committee that would like to speak to this amendment? Have any questions? Okay, so we'll look to members of committee to vote on the amendment. All in favor? That is carried. And then to vote on the motion as amended. I'll call the vote. All in favor, and that passes. Thank you. So again, for those viewing, we did move up item 7.2, which was the report to committee to align with the presentation. So now we're going back onto the agenda. So we come back to standing committee updates, and we have none. We do not have any deferred or referred items. We do have one advisory committee report to be received. That is the receival of the International Relations Committee dated October 7th, 2025. If no holds, we'll take that as consent. Okay, so that has been received. We do have a report to committee. This is the 2025 Q3 year-to-date internal audit status update. Any comments? Okay, so I'll motion for that, that the 2025 Q3 year-to-date internal audit status update be received as information. All in favor? I've got the hand from the mayor. Deputy Thompson, that's carried. Thank you. We have no items for discussion, so that does bring us to an adjournment. It concludes the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee